तव कथामृतम् तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीरितम् कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. So the master with the Brahmo devotees. So we will continue from the portion where we have concluded in the last class. So Sri Ramakrishna, after enunciating that in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where all the attributes falls off, that's a very high state. But we need not try to achieve that as the ultimate goal. Even just as a devotee, being related to the divine as a devotee, that itself is the be-all and end-all, can be the be-all and end-all of our spiritual journey. That's what he will be indicating in his subsequent conversation. So what he saying, yours is the path of bhakti. That is very good. It is an easy path. Who can fully know the infinite God? And what need is there of knowing the infinite? Having attained this rare human birth, my supreme need is to develop love for the lotus feet of God. So, this is the idea which we find even in Bhagavad Gita, that this mention that swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. So, though the highest spiritual evolution lies in the dissolution of one's ego and mergence with the Absolute, a little devotion can help us wade through the challenges of life unaffected. That how the devotion helps. That again and again we indicated. That once we develop that devotion, then our spiritual journey becomes easy. It becomes something spontaneous. So what's the way of developing the devotion? That repeated practice. That as we have mentioned, that in the Bhakti Shastras it has been mentioned, Ei Horinam Nite Nite Bhakti Mukul Futvichite. That go on taking the name of the divine, and gradually through this process of taking the name of the divine, you will suddenly find that the devotion is blooming in your heart. At present, the devotion is like a bud, it blooms just by repeating. The repetition is something which is common in all the religious tradition. As per our idea of the divinity is concerned, there may be a lot of variation, but as per the repetition is concerned, we will find that there is as such no disagreement among any of the path. So this repetition is the thing which helps in growing the devotion. As we have told, that our mind has been built in such a way, out of necessity, what I do today, when I go on doing it, it creates as if a path in my mind, and once the path is created, we start liking to it. So that's how we have developed all our obsessions. But when we take a resolution to traverse in the spiritual path and take some ideal as our goal and start repeating the prayer or the mantra, whatever it may be, every day with a resolution, the same thing, the process of the mind, what we repeat, that creates a path, and once the path is created, you start developing a liking for it. And once you develop a liking for it, there is no question of your will. The thing which you like, for that repetition, for that doing becomes something spontaneous. And once that becomes spontaneous, now your spiritual journey becomes easy. It becomes more spontaneous because you have developed a devotion for that. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying that yours is a path of bhakti. That is very good. It is an easy path. Who can fully know the infinite God? And what need is there of knowing the infinite? Having attained this rare human birth, my supreme need is to develop love for the lotus feet of God. So, when I go on doing my spiritual practices repeatedly with perseverance, with patience, know it for certain, it is bound to yield its result. The devotion will develop. And once that's developed, the devotion itself will enable us to wade through our spiritual journey spontaneously, easily. So once you have developed that little love, your work is done. That's why Bhagavad Gita says, Swalpam apyas, a little practice can save you from the great danger. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is stressing so much on bhakti. If a jug of water is enough to remove my thirst, why should I measure the quantity of water in a lake? I become drunk on even half a bottle of wine. What is the use of my calculating the quantity of liquor in the tavern? What need is there of knowing the infinite? So that's the idea. Just as a small child, you will find the parents, the father may be a great lawyer or maybe a great physician. The mother also may be quite established in his profession. But the child has nothing to do with that. The child relates with his parents only through love. That how great they are, that what's their educational qualifications. This has nothing to do with the child's love for the parent. Similar is our love for God. That how great He is, all those ideas have as such nothing to do with our spiritual evolution. The once we develop that love, that infinitude, we can never in any way measure the infinitude with our finite mind. So it's a futile attempt. It's just like, as it has been mentioned in our scriptures, that it's just like an attempt of a dwarf to reach the moon. So what to speak of a dwarf? Even a normal person cannot think of moon, and what to speak of a dwarf? So the idea is that it is something impossible. We can never know the infinite through the finite mind. But this finite mind can develop a love for an ideal by relating to that ideal, which is much larger than life, through the faculty of awe, through the faculty of devotion. And once you develop that, it becomes very easy to wade through the challenges of life. The life no more in any way can overwhelm you with the so-called challenges. That love itself will help us to wade through all the so-called challenges of life, because you always have the feeling that I am having an eternal companionship with the divine. This life is just a passing phase. I was, I am, I will be, God was, God is, God will be, and our relationship with the divine is something which is eternal. The life which we are passing through is something, just a journey. It's not the final goal. And that gives you a sense of temporariness of it. That gives a sense that it is something local. It doesn't pervade my entire existence. It is something temporary, not permanent. And that gives you the strength to wade through the challenges of life with the idea that they cannot overwhelm me. They cannot be something which is beyond my control. I know it is affecting just a part of my life. In no way it can affect the real me. So this idea, this awareness becomes something something permanent in our mind. It gets deep into the subconscious mind that I am, after all, in eternal relationship with the divine. And that changes your perspective. That broadens your perspective. You start building your life on that broadened perspective. And it not only it not only helps us to wade through the challenges of life individually, but it also helps us to relate with all, with love, with prema. As in the modern psychology, they say that P stands for positive emotions. When you have developed a love for the divine, that helps you to develop positive emotions. When you have positive emotions, that prema is an acronym. The R speaks of relationships. With the positive emotions, when you can broaden your perspective and you can start building your life on that broadened perspective, your relationships improve. Because the stress factor falls off. All the cracks in our relation is because of our stress, of all our concerns, which makes us too much careworn, too much self-concerned. We can just broaden our perspective, open up when all those concerns fall off by relating to the divine more and more, and then our relationships improve. And that relationship speaks of engagement. It is not just some superficial relationship. You really share and care. You care for those whom you think are related to you. That speaks of engagement. And all this is because of a meaning. There's a purpose that I am on a spiritual journey and all are co-travelers. So it is a joyous journey where all are going towards the destiny. The destiny is the divine. So we are all co-travelers. So this gives you a meaning. The meaning is that I am trying to lead the life based on that broadened perspective, and through my relationships, that's the thing I'm trying to transmute among others. So broaden their perspective, to relate to life with based on that broadened perspective, to build the life based on that broadened perspective. Then that way you find that meaning, and that meaning leads to accomplishment. Thus you will find your relationships at last is resulting in accomplishment. It doesn't disintegrate. It helps you to accomplish something where we all find that we find a sense of fulfillment through all those relationships. So the devotion with which we start do have a individual impact as well as it has a social impact. And if that alone can transform our life, why to just go on simply sitting and thinking of that what God is, trying to find out His nature, the infinite nature, with the help of the finite mind? It is a fruitless attempt. As Sri Ramakrishna in some other context is saying that the two friends went to a mango orchard, and it was mentioned that the trees are laden with ripened mango. You cannot carry them with you, but you can have as much mango as you want. So one friend just gets up on the tree and just goes on eating mangoes, and the other one is busy with counting the number of trees, how many branches each tree have, how many leaves each tree have. So who is the one intelligent one? So Sri Ramakrishna is asking that question. The one who is tasting the mango. What's the use in counting leaves? And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that yours is to enjoy the love of the communion with the divine. Why you simply waste your time in just doing an analytical study of the nature of the divine, which in no way is going to lead you anywhere. So have a taste for the divine, and that is going to change your perspective. The various states of mind of the Brahmagyani are described in the Vedas. The path of knowledge is extremely difficult. One cannot obtain jnana if one has the least trace of worldliness and the slightest attachment to woman and gold. This is not the path for the Kali Yuga. So this Kali Yuga, in some other place Sri Ramakrishna is saying that Kali Yuga is Annagata Prana. That the immediate direct literal translation means Annagata Prana means the one who cannot live without food. But there is actually a different intonation to the word Annagata Prana. What it means something which really speaks of this age. That see, when our so-called civilization started, when we learned agriculture, that brought leisure in life, that we cultivate, we store the food in our granary, and with that, the rest of the year, we can sustain ourselves. So what to do with the leisure? And there, the culture developed. The thought of the meaning of life, all those, it is not that it was not there before, but these things became more intense. It started nourishing the life in a more encompassing way, in a more pervasive way. So that's the idea, that with leisure, this religion started becoming more and more developed, more and more elaborate. But very interesting thing, that our entire attempt is to get more and more leisure, so that we can develop the cultural aspect of our life with our leisure. But see the paradox of our civilization, that everything we are doing, all our development is for leisure. At your home, you see that in the olden days, we have to do everything manually. Washing clothes, washing dishes, cleaning your home, everything was done manually. Now everything you will find, there's a dishwasher, there is a washing machine. To ease our life, there are so many gadgets. It speaks of trying to have more and more leisure. But just see the situation with all those things. Do we really have leisure? We will find that now the barrier between our home and the work is gradually getting deleted. It is just simply vanishing. There is no border. The work has started enveloping even my so-called private life, my family life. So the question comes that where is my leisure? Just to earn my living, I have to work throughout the day. Now to think of that type of life where I spend my life in pure contemplation, that context doesn't arise. So Annagata Pran may mean that just to earn my sustenance, I have to work throughout the day. With all the progress, my condition has become just like my ancestors before agriculture. That throughout the day they had to go for collecting roots, herbs, hunt, whatever it may be. Whatever food they get, with that they sustain for that day. Again next day they move out. No leisure for them. We with all our development has actually regressed to that situation. So in this, that means Annagata Prana. For my sustenance, for getting my food, I have to just work like a slave. And where does the question of having a separate time for sitting and contemplating on the divine, that doesn't arise. So that's why he's saying that it's extremely difficult. The path of knowledge is extremely difficult. One cannot obtain jnana if one has the least trace of worldliness and the slightest attachment to this woman and gold. This is not the path for the Kali Yuga. In this age, it is not possible. And then he is giving the indication that how intense that practice should be that can take you to that ultimate spiritual realization through the path of jnana. What he's saying? The Vedas speak of 7 planes where the mind dwells. When the mind is immersed in worldliness, it dwells in the 3 lower planes, at the navel, the organ of generation, and the organ of evacuation. In that state, the mind loses all its higher visions. It broods only on woman and gold. The 4th plane of the mind is at the heart. When the mind dwells there, one has the first glimpse of the spiritual consciousness. One sees light all around. Such a man, perceiving the divine light, becomes speechless with wonder and says, "Ah, what is this? What is this?" His mind does not go downward to the objects of the world. The 5th plane of the mind is at the throat. When the mind reaches this, the aspirant becomes free from all ignorance and delusion. He does not enjoy talking or hearing about anything but God. If people talk about worldly things, he leaves the place at once. The 6th plane is at the forehead. When the mind reaches it, the aspirant sees the form of God day and night. But even then, a little trace of ego remains. At the sight of that incomparable beauty of the God's form, one becomes intoxicated and rushes forth to touch and embrace it, but one doesn't succeed. It is like the light inside a lantern. One feels as if one could touch the light, but one cannot on account of the pain of the glass. On the top of the head is the seventh plane. When the mind rises there, one goes into samadhi. Then the Brahmagyani directly perceives Brahman. But in that state, his body does not last many days. He remains unconscious of the outer world. If milk is poured into his mouth, it runs out. Dwelling on this plane of consciousness, he gives up his body in 21 days. That is the condition of the Brahmagyani. But yours is the path of devotion. That is very good and easy path. So now he's speaking of the same 7 planes. It's even in Tantra, they speaks of the rising of the Kundalini. It is almost similar to that idea. It's very interesting that what that rising of the Kundalini, we find nowadays that so many this mystical explanations of this rising of the Kundalini is that what actually it speaks of. In Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, he gives a scientific approach to this idea of the rising of the Kundalini, what it speaks of. Now, let us just take the example of electricity. You know that electricity, we know that it needs a conductor to travel. If there is some conductor, there's some wires, it needs to travel. Can electricity be can electricity conduct without any such medium? So now we know that it is through the wires electricity is transmitted. But a very interesting thing, when there is a thunderstorm, there is a thunderbolt, you find that the arc is formed from the skies to the ground. And it is nothing but electricity. Where there is without any wire, as such, without any conductor, the electricity is being transmitted just through the air, just through the atmosphere. How is it possible? The science will say because of the high voltage, tremendously high voltage. When the same thing happens in a cathode ray tube. When the anode and the cathode, between that is a high voltage, then within that vacuum tube, without any such so-called conductor, the electrons are being transmitting, and that speaks of the conduction of the current. So without any as such wire, the electricity can be conducted if there is a tremendously high voltage. The higher the voltage, it can traverse through the medium. You can just go beyond that resistance and can traverse. So Swamiji is saying that because of the dissipation of our mental energy, in all sorts of distractions, in all sorts of sensitive pleasures of life, we are constantly dissipating our mind. Our mind is extremely weak. It's also like an electric charge. For us, the mind's or any mind's resolution to find expression, what happens that if I want to move something, the mind takes a resolution, you have to move. Then what is happening? That resolution is getting converted into nerve current. Through the nerves are like that wires, electric wires. Through that, the nervous impulse is being carried. It goes to that specific muscle. Just you will find, when you touch a live electric wire, what will happen? Your hand will immediately find that your muscles have cramped. So that's why those who are electricians, they are taught that if by chance you have to test whether a wire is live or not, of course there are instruments, but if there are no instruments, what's the way? Always touch with the back of your hand. So that when you touch with the back of your hand, if it's a live wire, your muscles will cramp. They will constrict. So now when you're touching with the back of your hand, your muscles will be constricting, so your hand will be kicked away from the wire. But if you're touching your palm, with the palm you're touching, you will be holding the wire because the muscles will cramp and you will hold the wire, and that will be the cause of electrocution. Even it may result in death. So what it speaks of? The same way the electricity works, the nerve current works. Your resolution gets converted into the nervous current, and when it says go and grab that thing, how you are grabbing? It is the nerve impulse, just like electricity, which is helping for the muscles to constrict. So it is almost like electricity. Just with electricity, your muscles constrict. With the nerve currents also, muscles, all our resolutions. Swami Vivekananda in those days gave that example. The one who is lifting the weight, we may think all his strength is in the muscles, but that is actually the resolution. That he has taken the resolution, I will have to lift the weight. That resolution has got converted into nervous current. The one with such huge muscle, you just go and cut the nerve. He is just a man without any strength. He will be something like an inert object. So it is the nerves through which that resolution is getting converted into electric current. What we are saying, that for us, we can never think of the nervous current to traverse without the nerves. But the one who has restraint, a yogi, who is always contemplating on the divine, all his energy is focused in his contemplation. So his power of his mind now becomes more and more. And when it becomes really great, then it can start traversing even without nerve. So where it starts traversing, you will find that in our spinal cord, when all the spinal cords, each of the spinal cord is like an 8 structure. Through one, if all the 8 structures are placed one above the other, that's like the spinal cord. You will have 2 vacuums, 2 holes. When all the 8s are stacked one above the other, there are 2 holes. One is for the sensory nerves, one is for the motor nerves. It is all nerves which are passing through that. And in the center, in the junction of the 8, there is a small hole. And that small hole, when it is stacked one above the other, it speaks of that central canalis, which is not a nerve, through which some nutrients actually pass to nourish the nerves. But it doesn't speak of any this nerves through that central canalis. Swamiji is actually indicating that central canalis is the Shushumna. In Yoga Shastra they say that the door of the Shushumna opens when the Kundalini starts rising. So Swamiji is indicating a very interesting thing, that when your mind power has increased a lot, the same way it can also pass, just the way in a cathode ray tube, the electrons can pass without a medium. Now your nerve current starts passing through that central canalis. It starts moving up. Now a very interesting thing happens. In the nervous system, there are plexus. Even if you study biology, you know there are plexus. There are some where the nerves are all conjoining together to form plexuses. There are some 7 plexus. And just see, even in our Yoga Shastra, they speak of, even in Tantra, they speak of the 7 centers. And they are exactly the 7 plexus. And this plexus, what it is? Very interesting. In an office, you will find no document is destroyed. The old documents have been kept. They are not used, but they are there. They have been stacked somewhere. They are stored somewhere. Similarly, in the process of evolution, what are the first thing which we were doing? Only 2 things. Even as a bacteria, what we were doing? Having food and procreation, nothing else. That to maintain our own body, we need food, and to continue, the life to continue, it has to have its offsprings. So these are the 2 things. So these 2 things are like the old file. It is there for all the living beings. So when the central canalis, it starts rising, the first plexus which is in the navel, in the organ of recreation, in the organ of evacuation, these 3 speaks of those basal instincts. You will find they speak that is at the beginning there is and it arouses all those instincts, because that's where it is passing through. When it rises to the heart. Now see, emotion is something which develops gradually in the process of evolution. For a bacteria, a microbe, whether emotion is there is a big question. They are doing everything out of compulsion. But as we have always spoken of, these compulsions, these obsessions, as we evolve as a creature, these compulsions actually get converted into emotions. It's a refined thing. The emotions develop from our compulsions. These obsessions at last finds expression in a more evolved creature as emotions, as love, relations. This has actually evolved, came from those basic necessities. And then these emotions have developed. So that's the higher plane, the heart. Still higher plane, this is unique to the humans. Emotions are there in other creatures apart from human beings. Maybe not in the lowest microbes, but we find in other vertebrates, mammals, emotion is there. A tiger do love its offspring. You will find that love, emotion is there in other creatures too. But what's something unique in human is in that next stage of evolution. That's something in the modern biology they call, modern psychology they call it dual representation. That no other creatures can do. It's something unique to human. What is this dual representation? A small child playing in the backyard, and the father goes to find out what the child is doing and finds that he's playing with a twig. Just with a twig in his hand, he's playing around. And the father asks, "What are you doing, my child?" And the child says, "Don't come near. I have a sword in my hand." So it appears to be very childish. But this simple act of a child to think the twig as a sword is something very, very human. No other creatures can do that. This is the dual representation. That this has happened how? That the evolution started taking a diversive route. Till now, the evolution was the more muscles you grow, the more stronger you are, the more evolved you are. And now the evolution has taken a divergent route, which speaks of evolution of the human. What? The more neurons you develop in your brain, the more smarter you are, not more stronger, the more evolved you are. So you will find from this dual representation, our language developed. Our language, when I see a mango is a mango, whether I call it mango or in other language, arm or whatever it may be. It is the same thing. My language, when there is no mango in my presence, I just say mango, the word mango. Immediately I know what it is. In my mind, immediately the visualization is there. So just see that how the language, the mathematical notations, everything speaks of this dual representation. All the human development has been possible because of this dual representation. That we learn, that all the physical evolution has stopped. Once you reach this state of a human being, as if the physical evolution has stopped, you start now evolving intellectually. You may say, how? Just see that once you develop that language because of the dual representation, what a great difference it has made. That the chimpanzee, even now, if it falls on the quicksand and dies, its next generation will continue the same thing. They can never learn. They all meet the same fate. The chimpanzee died, its child died, its grandchildren died, all falling on the quicksand. But as a human being, when there is a quicksand, one have made some fatal consequence or some dangerous situation was there where he was about to die. After that, you have just to keep one notice that please don't proceed. Here there is some quicksand. It will result in your death. And now that can avert danger for generations. So what has happened? These dual representations has helped us to grow intellectually, to store the knowledge intellectually. And that speaks of the language. Just see now, the higher than the emotion is the language. From that, after the emotion came this language. So Sri Ramakrishna also is speaking, indicating that in the heart is the center of emotion. The throat is the the center of the language. Means it's still higher. It has evolved. And when the language comes, from that, the thing comes is visualization. The language brings visualization. That's as we were saying, that the mango is not in your presence. Just you say the word mango, immediately you start visualizing. In your mind, the visualization forms. So from the language came the visualization. So this is the thing which represents the higher evolution. All the plexuses speaks of that. The base plexuses speaks of just the necessities of life. Yes, having food and procreation. After that comes the question of emotion. The higher plexus speaks of emotion. So as the Kundalini starts rising, because of your devotion, then this emotion, this devotion wells up. And then comes that emotion has to find expression through all the language. All the spirituality speaks of huge literature. The tremendous emotion which wells up for the mystic who has developed that love, that finds expression through that language, for which the center is the throat. And through that language, again it will take you to the visualization. That when you start describing the concepts of the divinity, that results in the visualization. With the visualization comes real focus. Why? You will find that our thought has two components. Whenever I am calling you, so to remember you, you have a name and you have a form. The moment I call you, what happens? Immediately there is a visualization of your form in my mind. So the name and form are the two components of each and every thought. Now when with my spiritual evolution, I have went to the state where I can visualize. Whenever I am speaking something, that I can visualize. When I am repeating the mantra, I can visualize. That makes my meditation extremely focused, because I am taking care of both the components of my thought, the name and the form. Both I am taking care. Generally what happens, we will find, when I am thinking mechanically, I may be repeating something, but my mind is distracted with so many visualizations. Why? As the thought has two components, I have not taken care of the visualization part. I'm just mechanically repeating something. The mind can still have visualization of all other things. And my repetition is that way futile, as my mind is not taking care of both the aspects of the thought, visualization as well as the language, the word as well as the name as well as the form. So when you have reached to the state of visualization, when it was just by repeating the mantra, the visualization becomes vivid, your mind becomes extremely focused. And the more the focused the mind is, the more the distractions has fallen off. At last, to take away the sense of our ego. The ego is the thing that I am, this body-mind complex is the last thing which has to fall off. When the mind becomes extremely focused, that also falls off. That also falls off, taking you to the realization. A type of, what's the realization? Where the ego has fallen off. That's the thing which is mergence with your real nature. Where the ego was the barrier, that has fallen off. And that has been spoken of as the seventh plane. So just see, the emotion results in the language results in visualization. Now your meditation becomes extremely focused. That focus can take you to the state beyond ego, where your idea of this limited individuality falls off, enabling you to merge with the Absolute. So now you will understand that what Sri Ramakrishna is speaking, and that's the thing which has been very nicely scientifically described by Swami in the Raja Yoga, to give an idea of what these 7 planes are. So this is really very difficult. But to develop a little bhakti, that is easy. To go to the heart center is easy. And once you have gone there, the remaining will take its course in due time. Once you have reached that you have got a little devotion, the others will take its due course. So Sri Ramakrishna is saying that though this highest goal is something which is very difficult in this age, but to develop a little bhakti, that you can do with a little effort, with a little patience, with a little perseverance, and that itself will take care of your remaining spiritual journey. To that though the Vedas have spoken of the 7 planes, and you may think that is impossible for me, you need not worry about it. That other things will spontaneously follow once you develop bhakti. So this is the idea we try to explain with the help of our neurology or psychology, that what's this rising of the consciousness through the various planes actually indicates. So let us again read it before we conclude today's class. We won't be proceeding after this. This is a very sublime idea. Just let us try to contemplate on it, that after this discussion, try to relate the words of Sri Ramakrishna with what just we discussed. The Vedas speak of 7 planes where the mind dwells. When the mind is immersed in worldliness, it dwells in the 3 lower planes, at the navel, the organ of generation, and the organ of evacuation. In that state, the mind loses all its higher visions. It broods only on woman and gold. The 4th plane of the mind is at the heart. When the mind dwells there, one has the first glimpse of spiritual consciousness. That's in the form of devotion, love. One sees light all around. Such a man, perceiving the divine light, becomes speechless with wonder and says, "Ah, what is this? What is this?" His mind does not go downward to the objects of the world. So he has developed that love. As we have told, that once you develop the love for the divine, the mind no more goes to the other distractions. What's the reason behind? All other our likings, it is something external. And that's why it is always related with concern. The wealth, these 3 types of Aishana the Vedanta speaks of. Putraishana, your desire for the children. Putraishana, Vittaishana, your desire for wealth. And Yashaishana, your desire for name and fame. So all these desires, you will find that what's the thing that Vedanta is speaking of? All this is related with this individual bound, this limited existence. So when the mind and all these desires, what speaks of? It speaks of something external. That's what I was just missing the point. That whether it is Putraishana or Vittaishana or Yashaishana, all our desires can be boiled down to these 3. For getting all these 3, I have to depend on something external. Till I get it, I am always having that concern. I may not get it. And when I get it, again I have that concern. I may lose it. So all our pursuits, called all the pursuits, is associated with concerns. But once you develop the love for the divine, that's Ramakrishna saying you don't go downward anymore. Why? This is the love which cannot coexist with other love. Why? It is something very intrinsic. Once you develop that love, no one can take it away from you. Other things, that your relations can break, your wealth you can lose, but this is something no one can take away from you. In the words of Mirabai, "Kharche nahi koi, chor na leve, dina dina varat savav." It doesn't get expended. No one can steal it away from you. The more you practice, the more the groove of your mind gets deepened, the more intense becomes your love. Now, the path which you have created is intrinsic. It has nothing to do with the external world. And as a result, what has happened? You have created as if a freeway where there is no traffic. All other desires are passing, as like passing through the traffic road, where there are a lot of junctions. Because my object of desire, there is a job there where for their 100 applicants, only 2 may get. So other 98 has to be just simply removed. Only 2 will be selected. The others won't be selected. So that speaks of as if you are in the traffic roads. Who will get the green signal? We don't know. You may get the red signal or you may get the green signal. But now you have created a path, a new path, where there is no traffic. It is intrinsic. The love for divine, your love for divine in no way is in any way it's in competition with others' love for divine. When I am loving a divine, you can also love the divine. In no way we are competing with each other. And that speaks of the free way which I have created. And once you have created the free way, in our natural tendency will be to pass through that freeway. Why should we go through that traffic road if the freeway is there? So once the love for the divine has developed, know it for certain the other paths are no more traversed, they fall off. You start more and more dwelling in that, the line of least resistance, where there is no resistance, where the joy which you get from your relationship, from your wealth, the more manifold joy you get from the love of the divine. And there is no, as such, hindrance in its path. It is whenever you want, it is with you. So there is no question of, again, going back to the old way of life. That's why he's saying his mind does not go downward to the objects of the world. The fifth plane of the mind is the throat. That once that emotion has developed, now it finds expression through your language. When the mind reaches this, the aspirant becomes free from all ignorance and delusion. He does not enjoy talking or hearing about anything but God. So now constantly that language which you have developed is now fully used for contemplating on the divine. If people talk about worldly things, he leaves the place at once. And with that language develops that aspect of vision. As the more and more your emotions becomes intensified, that when you're speaking, just when the mother speaks of the child, she has the vivid vision of the child in her mind. So similarly, here also the vision, the sixth plane comes. The sixth plane is at the forehead. When the mind reaches it, the aspirant sees the form of God day and night. But even then, a little trace of ego remains. At the sight of that incomparable beauty of God's form, one becomes intoxicated and rushes forth to touch and embrace it. But one doesn't succeed. It is like the light inside a lantern. One feels as if one could touch the light, but one cannot on account of the pain of the glass. So what's the idea? That as the little ego is still there, there's no question of merging into it. The idea that I am meditating, the object of meditation, and the process of meditation is still there. These triads are still there. That's why he's saying as if I can feel I can touch it, but still I cannot touch it. The object of meditation is still separate from the one who is meditating. There is a distinction between dhyana, dhyata, dheya. So you cannot touch. You cannot become one with it. So that's the idea which Sri Ramakrishna is saying. In some other place they say, in allegorically they say it a very nice thing, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an avatar of Krishna and Radha, both together. They say Anta Krishna Bahi Radha. That his external body is, that he was very bright complexion, that external body is like of Radha, inwardly it is Krishna. Very poetically they describe that when as Krishna and Radha in that incarnation, Radha used to pray to Krishna that please stay in my heart. Why? Then you will be hidden. Otherwise I have to face this censor of the society. The society never allows me to meet you. So please be in my heart. And then Krishna, as just to answer to that prayer of Radha, takes the birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's how poetically they describe. That now, outwardly he is like Radha, full of devotion, and Krishna is now inside. And now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is constantly eager to have the vision of the divine. But divine somehow, that's called the Viraha Dasha. He's not coming into his vicinity. How it will come? Because he himself has prayed in the previous incarnation that you be hidden in my heart. So he's in the heart. He cannot in any way have communion with him. So that's a poetical way of describing. And that's the idea which has been spoken of in the sixth plane. The idea of devotee and the God is still there. But when the focus becomes so intense, where the ego also drops off, and where the devotee as if merges with the object of his devotion, that's the seventh plane. In the top, the head is the seventh plane. When the mind rises there, one goes into samadhi, then the Brahmagyani directly perceives Brahman. But in that state, his body does not last when the ego falls off. That's the thing which keeps our body. When it has fallen off, the question of the body, maintenance of the body is no more there. If from that mergence again you come back to the sixth plane, then again you can stay with the body. But if it merges there, in 21 days the body falls off. He remains unconscious of the outer world. If milk is poured into his mouth, it runs out, dwelling on this plane of consciousness. He gives up his body in 21 days. That is the condition of the Brahmagyani. After saying this, now he says, but yours is the path of devotion. You need not just, for certain that that's the highest title we've spoken of, but you need not worry about that. Just to try to develop that devotion. The rest all will be taken care itself in due time. And once you have developed devotion, all the struggles of life, this life which I feel is full of hurdles, that falls off. So your journey, when it will take you to that ultimate goal, let us forget about that. Once you develop that devotion, a spontaneity comes in your life. Try to develop that. And to develop that is something comparatively easy. So that's why I say that is a very good and easy path. So with this, we will stop our discussion today. We will continue with the remaining portion of his discussion on this subject. Again, you will find that in the words of Ramakrishna, it appears to be so simple, but he's actually covering the entire gamut of spirituality. It's sometimes the simple words, we miss the real context of it. It's so simple words he's speaking, but he's speaking of the highest spiritual evolution in these few words. So we will continue with this very sublime and profound discussion again in the next class. With this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskars.